Hey everyone, welcome back to Overshadowed, a Native American history channel. I'm your host, Joe, and I have a master's degree in American Studies with an emphasis in American history and Native American history. Today, I'd like to speak with you about an important issue that you've probably heard about in the news, and that is the issue of American Indian education and the current Trump administration's efforts to roll back federal government policies regarding Native American, Alaskan Native, and Native Hawaiian education. Following the American Civil War, the federal government initiated a comprehensive effort to integrate American Indians into mainstream American society, primarily through education. This period saw the proliferation of both mission and industrial boarding schools, often operating under the infamous philosophy to kill the Indian, save the man. Early mission schools, while sometimes offering education, frequently failed to equip Indigenous students with practical tools for their daily lives. Arguably the most well-known of the boarding schools was the Carlisle Indian Industrial School, established by Richard Henry Pratt in 1879, after his initial proposal to bring Indian prisoners to the Hampton Institute became a prominent model for off-reservation boarding schools. Pratt's curriculum and outing program, which placed Indigenous children in white homes as cheap labor, were explicitly designed for assimilation. These schools often provided vocational training like farming or homemaking, but these skills frequently became outdated or irrelevant upon the students' return to their reservations, leaving them ill-prepared for employment or community life. Furthermore, boarding schools, which increasingly took the place of mission schools as high schools, while reservation day schools served as elementary education facilities, were notoriously underfunded, dangerous. Children often suffered from poor living conditions, inadequate food, and unsanitary dormitories, and those places were susceptible to disease. Beyond physical hardships, the forced denial of language, culture, and history was pervasive, making it difficult for students to learn new concepts and contributing to feelings of conflict and ill preparedness when they returned home, as they received no training in what it means to be an Indian. The government's policy aimed to break familial bonds, leading to divisions between friendlies who favored education and hostiles who resisted it, sometimes resulting in police being sent to force children into school. However, by the early 1920s, criticisms of the federal government's Indian policy were mounting, which prompted a 1923 committee to recommend improved school facilities, higher teacher salaries, and additional scholarships. Then in 1928, the Merriam Report, a scathing report condemning the Bureau of Indian Affairs, advocating for protection of Indian property, greater tribal autonomy, and the end of the allotment policy. John Collier, appointed Commissioner of Indian Affairs in 1933, worked to implement these reforms, notably through the Indian Reorganization Act, which ended the allotment and granted American Indians a greater degree of self-determination. Collier was a champion of progressive education, focusing on the child learning experience as advocated by John Dewey. Even later, the Navajo Special 5-Year Program, introduced after World War I, sought to return students to school with an emphasis on English instruction for job opportunities, acknowledging the limited economic prospects on reservations. However, by the mid-20th century, new challenges emerged with the termination and relocation policies designed to set American Indians free by ending reservations and moving individuals to urban centers. This often severed the ties of traditional family structures and treaty rights, offering little support and frequently moving families from rural to urban poverty. The term self-determination itself became contested, used by conservatives in the 1950s to mean stripping government support and even if established by treaty, while American Indians understood it as linking sovereignty with self determination, self government, and upholding treaty rights. In recent decades, many tribes have taken ownership of their schools, as exemplified by the Pueblo School in New Mexico, educating children on their own terms. More recently, in October 2024, the Biden administration formally apologized for the abuse and trauma inflicted by the federal government's indigenous boarding school system. Entering into its second term, the Trump administration has introduced policy shifts that have generated significant apprehensions within Native American communities, specifically regarding education efforts. On January 29, 2025, President Trump issued an executive order aiming to expand educational freedom and opportunity for families, directing the Secretary of the Interior to explore mechanisms for families of Bureau of Indian Education students to use federal funding for private, faith-based, and public charter schools. This order commenced the process of dismantling the Department of Education, with President Trump publicly stating his intent to eliminate the department, though full elimination still requires congressional approval. Native American leaders and education advocates have voiced strong concerns, asserting that the federal government, not the states, bears the trust and treaty obligations to provide education to American Indians, Alaskan Natives, and Native Hawaiians. Senator Brian Schatz has highlighted that over 90% of Native American students attend public school, and that without the DOE, they would be at the mercy of state governments that have no legal responsibility to meet their needs. Crucial programs administered by the DOE, such as Title VI, Indian Education, Impact Aid, and components of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which provide vital funding for culturally responsive education, language revitalization, and special education services, would be severely impacted. Adding to these concerns, the Trump administration has proposed cutting off federal funding from tribal colleges and universities, or TCUs for short, by nearly 90%, from over $182 million to just over $22 million for 2026. This proposed reduction, if supported by Congress, would likely force the closure of most, if not all, of the nation's 37 TCUs. These institutions are indispensable, serving 15,000 students and relying on federal funding for over 75% of their annual budget, offering culturally relevant education, preserving indigenous languages, and acting as an economic driver in often remote and impoverished regions. Anawaki Rose, president and CEO of the American Indian Higher Education Consortium, confirmed that TCU leaders were not consulted about the proposed cuts and stated the numbers would close all tribal colleges. Further compounding the challenges, the administration implemented significant staff reductions at Bureau of Indian Education operated institutions, such as Haskell Indian Nations University in Kansas and the Southwestern Indian Polytechnic Institute, or SIPI, in New Mexico, citing efforts to increase efficiency. At SIPI, nearly a quarter of the staff, including 9 instructors, were fired or forced to resign, leading to unsafe conditions, unresolved power outages, and students being unable to complete their assignments. Similarly, Haskell lost over a quarter of its staff, including deans, instructors, and residential advisors, resulting in shuttered student centers, reduced meal sizes, bathrooms without toilet paper, and delayed or undispersed financial aid. Although some of the staff was rehired as temporary adjuncts, other critical positions such as cafeteria workers and custodians were not. Consequently, 3 tribal nations and 5 Native American students have filed a lawsuit, alleging that the Trump administration has failed its legal obligations to tribes by implementing these job cuts without consultation, as the Bureau of Indian Education is responsible for providing education to Native Americans and Alaskan Natives as part of the U.S. government's trust responsibilities. The initial weeks of the Trump administration's second term also saw a directive from the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, to suspend all federal financial support impacting key activities serving tribal communities. Although this order was rescinded 2 days later following emergency legal challenges, tribes continued to experience disruptions, including frozen grant portals and delays in funding for critical services, causing chaos and confusion in Indian country. Additionally, over 1.6 million in federal funds for projects aimed at capturing and digitizing stories of systematic abuse in Native American boarding schools has been slashed. The National Endowment for the Humanities terminated grants, including over 282,000 for National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition initiatives, halting their work to digitize records for a database vital for Native Americans seeking to find loved ones connected with government boarding schools. These cuts, following a major federal investigation and apology from the previous administration, are viewed as a seismic shift away from the acknowledging of this dark chapter of history, despite being a fraction of the federal government's total budget, and difficult to justify as promoting efficiency. Project 2025, a broader roadmap for the Trump administration, suggests transferring all federal Indian education programs to the Bureau of Indian Education to streamline services, while at the same time criticizing those same BIE schools as among the worst performing, though it provides limited detail on educational reform. Legal experts suggest the Heritage Foundation's ultimate goal, which produced Project 2025, is to assimilate indigenous nations and strip them of their sovereignty. In essence, the historical trajectory of American Indian education is marked by a forceful, often violent push for assimilation, met with sustained indigenous resistance and a demand for self-determination. The recent actions of the Trump administration, characterized by proposed sweeping budget cuts, significant staff reductions, and policy shifts, represent a profound reversal of policies made in recognizing and upholding federal trust and treaty obligations towards Native American education. These measures raise grave concerns about the future of tribal sovereignty and the educational opportunities available to Indigenous students, echoing a long history of federal policies that have undermined rather than supported Native American communities. Thank you, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and share this video if you found it informative, and remember to subscribe and hit that bell to receive notifications when I post another video, and don't forget to comment. If you'd like to support Native Americans, please consider donating to the American Indian Rights Fund. I'll leave a link below in the comments. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time on Overshadowed.